Winning out for the markets today was this reprieve on trade for the time being, and the belief that since cameras are relaying what's going on in Hong Kong for the world to see, maybe not mainland China to see, nothing will happen. Why would the Chinese risk it? Then again, they did risk it some 30 years ago at Tiananmen Square. Could that ever happen again? The fallout? With Market Watchers Larry Schover, we've got John Hilsenrath and Rebecca Walser. Rebecca, to you. That's the half full glass of looking at what's going on in Hong Kong, that the Chinese wouldn't dare consider a violent response to this, that there's too much on the line. What do you think?
Well, I think the Hong Kong people are basically saying, hey, the U.S. is going against China for the first time in many years, and it's our opportunity maybe. I think they're leveraging it, and good for them. They should. I mean, obviously, China has a lot of at stake, and, you know, when you go from British rule to Chinese rule, it's a huge difference, right, for these people, and they put up with it for a long time. I think that the extradition law was just the first or the last thing that broke their back. So, you know, I don't know that China will do something on the world stage, though, Neil. We'll have to see.
You know, John Hilsenrath, a number of people who follow China very closely, including Gordon Chang, said at its core it's a military power. It will always respond in a military way, and that's what worries him. What do you think?
Well, I actually lived in Hong Kong in the late 1990s, and one of the first things I learned about the Chinese government and Chinese power is that what the government there values more than anything else is social stability. When they see instability, they will act, and as they demonstrated in the Tiananmen Square episode, they will act brutally if they need to. You know, I think that in the case of these protests, we're going through a transition right now. A couple of weeks ago, what was going on was the Hong Kong protesters were protesting against a very specific law, an extradition law that they didn't like. The Chinese government backed down. Now I think this is kind of taking on a broader and more chaotic tone, and I think you have to think that the government could act very forcefully to calm it down.
You know, there are a couple of developments, Larry Schover, that maybe raise some concern about how the Chinese would handle it. It's not only these reports that they've got troops in the region on the border, but the fact that they've brought back the former deputy commissioner, this Alan Lau, who was very instrumental in dealing with the pro-democracy sit-ins we had a few years back. In other words, he's experienced in dealing with protesters. He's supposedly the brains behind infiltrating the protester ranks by having soldiers dress up like them. And I'm wondering where this is going, and what do you think?
Well, I hope not the worst case scenario, but I'm actually almost counting on it, because it doesn't seem like these protests are stopping, and I'm sure that that's what they're hoping for, the momentum just to, you know, release itself just a little bit. But that said, you know, I've made 9 trips to mainland China over the last 4 years. I'm by no means an expert on the country, but they do really value social stability, as Jonathan said. And I agree 100%. So I think it could be, you know, end up terribly bad. Right now, the markets don't seem to think that, except when you look at the interest rates. Right. But other than that, yeah, anything could happen, and I'm expecting anything to happen right now.
You know, I look at this, Rebecca, and I think the half-full glass version of this is that no way China would dare risk any of this. And I'm thinking of maybe the president's move today to offer something on trade, delaying the implementation of some of those tariffs until at least Christmas time or right before it, is a sign that he wants to work with them on this, even without drawing attention to it. What do you think?
Yes, I think so, Neil. I think this was President Trump's perfect way of giving the American business, you know, relief before the holiday. There's a lot of trade associations that have petitioned him to basically give them some relief before the holiday, because this would have a huge impact on consumer, you know, things that we buy for the holidays, game consoles, laptops, all these things, and shoes, clothing. And obviously he had a way that he could do that without basically making it, you know, a Chinese move. It wasn't the Chinese move. And so maybe China will look at this and say, okay, you know, we maybe can buy some agriculture now, because as soon as they announced, obviously, the 10% tariffs on the $300 billion, the agriculture came off the table. So we need them to buy agriculture, like they said. So this is a way for him to give a little bit, and so that we can get some more back.
Hey, Neil, can I throw out two points? In terms of the tariff move today, I would say it's good for consumers, but actually bad for business, because, you know, American business right now is complaining that the trade environment and the tariff environment is so uncertain that they don't know how and when and where to make investments. And I think delaying a tariff without saying whether it's going to be fully installed or not fully installed is only prolonging that uncertainty. I don't think it helps business. I think it helps to keep prices down going into the holidays, which is nice. The other point I would make on, reading this as a signal to the Chinese, I think the Chinese have kind of given up at this point trying to read the president's signals, because the U.S. trade position changes so much. It's really hard to predict. I think the Chinese would be foolish to read too much into what he did today. I think this was meant for American consumers and not China.
All right, guys, thank you all very, very much. Well, American consumers certainly welcome the news, certainly American investors. What the ranking